Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Sense of Things, another week with Jeff and Ron. On today's show, Ron's going to go over the leading economic indicators. He's going to talk about S&P 500 concentration as well. Some looking at other indices and their concentration. Sometimes we say the S&P is bad. You have no idea when you look at some of these other markets. So Ron's got a good breakdown on that. Not a lot of economic news this week, so I actually went on a little bit of a technical analysis thing and want to talk a little bit about some of my observations, technical analysis-wise, of the S&P and the QQQ and oil and all that kind of good stuff. Also, one economic thing to this week was Richmond Fed. What I did is I actually pulled several of the Feds, and we'll kind of do a little comparison of those to see what manufacturing looks like right now. So stay tuned. We'll be right back on in just 1 second. Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. Ron, how are you, my friend?
Good morning. Forget about spring. Summer is upon us. Actually, out in Philly and the Jersey area, they had 94, 95-degree weather
Yeah.
with humidity. We actually dropped below triple digits. It's been gorgeous. High
Yeah.
70s, low 80s in the morning, high 80s, low 90s in the afternoon with no humidity. It's wonderful.
We have had air you can wear every day for the last 2 weeks, and we're going to have about
Keep
at
it.
least a week and a half of rain.
Oh,
They're saying that May and June are going to be the wettest months that we've seen in a couple times. We're rolling into an El Nino, and that just means that we'll have a wet summer, and then our winter is going to be cold as crap and a lot of precipitation. So it is good and bad. It's nice getting rain in the summer, but that usually leads to a really damn cold winter, which is it. Yeah.
but you know what? Let's not go by the old adage, sell in May and go away, because that's only worked about, I think, 30 or 35% of the time.
Yeah, exactly. I always remember that was the thing, and I'm like, just stay invested. Stay invested, adjust your cash
Yeah, what about
position
that summer
occasionally.
rally?
Who knows? Yeah, I don't know. We'll talk about that.
All right, here we go. This week in history. 1785, hot air balloon crash becomes world's first aviation disaster in Ireland. That's a long time
Interesting.
ago. It's amazing they figured some of that out.
I can't remember
No
when the
four.
Montgolfier brothers were when they did their first hot air balloon, but it had to have been close to that time period.
Yep, 1804, Lewis and Clark depart to explore
Nice.
the Northwest. You know what? I got to tell you, I was up in Sedona last weekend on an overnight, and you just go up there going, how the hell did somebody find this? Like, how did they even
Yeah.
get here? And what made them decide it's a town? And if you
Yeah.
just think of even how much of our country is just rocks and woodland,
Yeah, especially out in the West where you live.
and
It's just
just people,
piles of
yeah. Hey, we're going to go north. I don't know what we're going to find, but we're going to go north.
yeah, if you want a good look at the Lewis and Clark expedition, Stephen Ambrose's book on that was really the best book I've ever read on it. It was just outstanding. And I love Stephen Ambrose's stuff, but it just talking about literally you're like, I don't know where we're going. We're just gonna keep going until we hit water
And
someplace.
really
And
good diaries and records, which
yeah,
helped. But even, I don't know, did they have compasses? They were navigated by the stars, but even so traveling during the day. So
yeah.
I
Yeah, and Clark was a surveyor, so he had like all his survey equipment with him and all that stuff. So yeah, they had compasses and stuff. So the problem is there's no maps out there, so they had to map their way through that whole thing and figure it
they
out. And
created the map.
yeah, and then the interesting part of that book is when they talk about when they got to like what is now Washington and the main river that kind of runs between Oregon and Washington. Uh, they got there and it was like, oh crap, we can't go any farther because it literally, the water went both ways and it's like, oh crap, we can't keep going. So they literally had to portage these ginormous boats around all that stuff so that they could get to the other side and go down the main thing. So it's a really interesting story. And I mean, Then
We're
you got
still
all the
on
way out
time.
there and you get out all the way out there and you got to turn around and come all the way back.
All right. 1924, J. Edgar
Oh,
Hoover begins his 48-year tenure as the FBI director and putting on women's clothes. That's fantastic.
that too. And having something
1940.
on everybody in the government at one
Yeah.
point or another.
I thought this happened a few years before. 1940, Winston Churchill
Yeah.
becomes Prime Minister of Britain. And then I
Yep.
think it was 1947, he is ousted because he did a
Yes, he
terrible
is.
job. He did a
And
terrible
within
job.
2 years, he was right back in the place because they're like, oh crap, these guys suck.
1941, first Allied jet-propelled aircraft flies.
Interesting.
Actually, they found out that the Nazis were about the same time, and if they would have perfected it because they put their money and resources elsewhere, who knows? Could have been a big change in the war back then
Yeah.
if they would have had jet airplanes.
Yeah. The Me-262s were actually a really dang good airplane. If they could have produced more of them, they would have been, they would have been hell for our bomber planes.
They were about 2 or 3 years away in 1945 from really doing mass production on it. If they would have started
Yeah.
4 years earlier, I mean,
Yeah.
they
They spent a lot. Yeah. They
in
spent a
Britain,
lot more money on
without getting
time on
caught.
rock. Yeah. Yeah. They spent more money and time on rocket engines and stuff like that, and not as much on jets.
Or if they didn't fight the Russians at the same time as the West.
Yep.
Anyway, we keep going down that road for a whole episode. 1948, State of Israel proclaimed.
Interesting. Yep.
1947, B.F. Goodrich announces development of tubeless tire. I thought this was interesting. There's a couple of other things here, but I don't know. Is B.F. Goodrich even still around?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're owned by, Goodrich is owned by Firestone, if I remember correctly.
1961, President Kennedy orders more troops to South Vietnam. And of course, they were for police action and not for fighting. Eisenhower started it with the advisors. Kennedy escalated it. We all know what happened from that point forward.
Well,
He
even
did
that, it
start
was
in
still,
65.
it was still military advisors. And then, of course, LBJ came in and listened to all the doofuses that thought that they could make it into a conventional war. And then we get mired into it for 15 years.
LeMay and Westmoreland. They were the two controlling it, and McNamara listened to them too much. All right, moving on. 1965, Rolling Stones record Satisfaction, which came to Keith Richards in his sleep. And the other part of this story was he was in such a stupor that actually he had recorded it on tape, woke up the next morning, didn't remember doing it. It wasn't actually in this article, but I remember the story of the riff in the beginning, which is one of the most famous and most recognizable opening riffs to a song probably ever.
Now that is talent when you can
alcohol a
record.
few years ago, so I guess the creativity is gone.
Yeah. I don't know. He's 175 years old now, so,
He looks
or
it.
at least he looks it.
He gave up cigarettes and he gave up alcohol, so he might go a few more years, but
Yeah. Gave up
his
cigarettes and alcohol.
his
Yeah.
internals must be turning to dust.
Yeah. I think he's replaced his entire blood supply at least 40 times in his life.
Yeah. 1973, Bobby Riggs and Margaret Court face off in the first Battle of the Sexes. He was 55. And actually, quick story, so that when he played Billie Jean King, the story was he was in debt to gamblers and he threw the match. I actually met a guy many years later. We had to go around the room. It was when I was in the tech world, and he introduced himself. He goes, I played both John McEnroe and Bobby Riggs. I beat one and I lost a semester's worth of college tuition to the other. You figure out who was who. Now, obviously, he beat John McEnroe when he was like 14 years old.
Wow.
He did. He lost semesters of tuition to Bobby Riggs.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And knowing Bobby Riggs, that would not surprise me that he would take somebody's tuition money. He's a scumbag.
20
I'm sorry, I
was
don't
20 years
buy.
old at the time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't buy that he threw the match because she was a badass player.
No, actually, I do think he not threw the match. I think he lost on purpose. Don't get me wrong. I've heard from some people that he could have played better because if you saw how he played against Margaret Court, and I've watched video, not the whole thing. I mean, he still had it at 55. Billie Jean King was an awesome player. I'm not saying she wasn't, but you don't know. You'll never know the truth. He's dead.
Yeah.
All right, 1973, America's first space station Skylab is launched.
Okay.
1980, government approves $1.5 billion loan, which is minuscule money today for
Yeah.
Chrysler. Lee Iacocca took over from Ford, and the rest is history.
And they made a bunch of crappy cars throughout the
The K
entire
car saved them.
1980s. Yeah, it did. It was awful, but yeah, it saved them.
That was one of the first stocks when I was 12 years old I bought. The symbol was C at the
Yep.
time, which eventually Citibank took or Citicorp took. And I actually made some money on it. I think I had 2 shares or 3 shares or whatever. Anyway, in 1981, Bob Marley dies at 36. I
Way
thought
too
that
early.
movie they did was horrific.
It
I
was
saw a
awful.
couple of good documentaries on him. He
Yeah.
actually died of an infection from getting cut when he got kicked playing soccer. There was some
Yeah, it was his
story.
toe of all things. Yeah, it was he played barefoot soccer basically and hurt his toe, and it just became it was actually cancer that killed him, but yeah, it came from a wound on his foot, on his toe of all things.
1985, Philadelphia police drop bomb on Move headquarters, killing 11. Now, rather
Okay.
ironically, I was working. This was the third 33, 45. This was the third year I worked this summer at the Philadelphia Stock Exchange. And this had happened. That was my third summer, 2 months before I was starting to work there again for my last summer. And the interesting story, these were people that wanted to be off the grid. They had an apartment. It wasn't an apartment building. It was like a brownstone, considering it a brownstone. And they had livestock in the back that they were killing for food. They were like climbing the wall. They were doing all these things like making a bunker. And
Jesus.
Philadelphia they were trying to remove them legally and everything else, couldn't do it for months. And then for whatever reason, from a helicopter, they dropped some C4 on the roof or whatever, and the whole house caught fire and killed 11 people.
Okay, this is just the weirdest thing ever. I did not even
No, you
remotely
read
hear
the
about it.
story. Yeah, oh yeah. I don't know how the mayor survived the next election because it was his decision. But they should have brought in the FBI or a SWAT team or I don't know. But
Anybody,
probably
just
could have been
don't just take a bomb and it's up.
I hate to say it, it was like a Waco, Texas situation 8 years
Yeah.
later
Yeah.
where these people won't move. What do you do? They tried to go in and get them, right? They actually set fire, the Waco, Texas thing with Koresh. They set fire internally. They didn't, the FBI or whoever it was, didn't do that. It's just crazy. When you get these people that are hell bent, draw a line in the sand, what are you going to do?
Yeah, that's the problem. And then they bring in all the other innocent people that are there. You have the few crazies that are in charge, but everybody, literally in the Branch Davidian thing, everybody was just the ones that were left were just so nutso that they were willing to die for their beliefs.
It was basically a Jonestown and Waco.
Yep. Without
All
the
right,
Kool-Aid.
1997, Deep Blue, IBM defeats Gary Kasparov in chess match.
Yep.
Then I think he went back and beat him or something. I don't know. All right, here we go. So we always talk about the overconcentration in the S&P of the top 10 stocks. And obviously NVIDIA is a big percent. You take a look, everybody else knows these other ones. But actually, if you take a look at another index, which is the MSCI, MSCI stands for Morgan Stanley Composite Index for EM, the emerging markets, it's way out of whack. You have TSMC, it's 14%. Samsung, I think, has actually increased its share there, is at 6%. I don't know who SK Hynix is. I've heard of them, but I'm sure they're tech.
Yeah. Then Tencent and Alibaba, Chinese companies.
Yeah, we were having a conversation like I never use the S&P 500 as a benchmark. Even RSP, which is the equal weight, you can use, but even so, there's an overconcentration of the top 10. Not as bad as 39%, but it's still pretty bad.
Yeah. Now, and you look at the S&P 500, look at what percentage are chip makers. It's 40% of the index are chip makers.
The baby NASDAQ 100.
Yeah, it's just nuts.
All right, and leading economic indicators. We haven't touched this in a while, but here's the interesting thing behind all this, and not much has really changed. We're still going down. Yeah, it hasn't changed much, and We never got into a recession when we crossed through because we all thought we were going to hit one here in 23 or early 24.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. But meanwhile, all the LEI numbers are on the decline. And on the right side here, you can just see where we are, where the changes are. Look, consumer expectations for business conditions. Wow, nobody's expecting anything good. Now, this was
Mm,
March, right? This was the beginning of the war, during the war. All right, so
yeah.
maybe this is a little sentiment slanted, but even I don't know what your thoughts are here. I got one more slide, but I mean, when is the ice gonna break on this? We've been talking
Yeah.
about it for a while.
And the funny part is we've talked about this before. I'm like, it the media's obsession with one, hating the president, and two, this just it's just like this never ending kind of negativity about the economy. What do you think? People are just gonna, it's what they think and what they do. That's the problem.
Well,
What
the
they
other
think is,
problem
oh,
is
consumer sentiment's horrible, but then they still go out and spend money. So
it's not just the media, my man. I mean,
yeah,
it's nobody believes anything that comes out of the White House or Congress anyway, because
yeah,
whatever they say today is different tomorrow. Remember, military operations were winding down 6 weeks ago. We all knew that was bullshit, right? So my whole point is that at some point, people get callous to anything that is coming out. So they're, of course, either they're negative or they're just
mhm,
turning a blind eye and just, hey, man, I'm
yep,
just going to live. I'm going to do what I need to do.
yeah. And that's the reality of it is, I don't know if consumer sentiment means crap at this point. People are just flat out negative and have been for years. Consumer sentiment has been complete crap as long as I can remember back at this point. Yet we still people spending money. We see people even in the face of massive increases in the cost of flights and everything else. Flights are full, flights, vacation destinations are off, bookings on cruise lines are out almost 2.5 years at this point. So especially on any of the big new cruise ships, you can't get onto them for about 2 years in most cases.
We'll see how the hantavirus spreads. Maybe that goes down.
Yeah, whatever. And Ebola and everything else. So let me kind of show my take on some of this too, because what I'm seeing just from technical analyst point of view, uh, yes, consumer sentiment's down. Yes, the market, yeah, with the beginning of the war, really the entire year this year. This is the QQQ, so the Nasdaq. The entire year has just been flat, and then went down with the war, and then with that one point at the beginning of April where we started talking about, okay, this thing's winding down. We're not bombing the crap out of them anymore. And of course, the market took off. Now, from a technical analyst standpoint, here's a couple things that I look at. The different lines that are on the screen here. You have the 50-day moving average, the 100-day, and the 200 or the 200-day moving average that I keep on here. And then this gray spot is what's called the Bollinger Bands. And so Bollinger Bands just measure volatility of the market on any given day. The farther apart they are, it means that the market's kind of moving in a big direction one way. When they start to pinch down, it means that its volatility is shortening up a little bit. So you could see Bollinger Bands were pretty tight up until that point where things took off. From a technical analyst standpoint, I look at this and I go, look at the volume of the market here. It was really strong. There was a lot of volume going into this downward trend for a while. Then we had this turn in the market and we took off like a rocket ship exponentially on not a whole hell of a lot of volume here. Probably about maybe 2/3 of the volume that we had prior to that, even going into the beginning of the year. So what that tells me as a technical analyst is, yeah, we've had a good rally and it's been fun hearing from my clients going, oh my God, this is amazing. And we're making all kinds of money. But what I would say is it makes me somewhat uncomfortable that it's been kind of not yes, it's been a rally, but it's been a rally on not a whole lot of strength when it comes to volume. And you see the same thing with the S&P 500. So yes, it's been great seeing this shot up. What my take on this is, and I think we're rolling into another period of Are we going to have to go in and bomb the crap out of them again to get them to break? I think at the very least point, we could see things go sideways for quite a while here as we go through the summer. A big reason for that, of course, is oil. Oil was its usual, just putter along until, of course, we went into active combat. Oil went up. One thing that I would say is the volatility of oil is getting down. It's still elevated, don't get me wrong, but it's really started to mellow out a little bit. That's the best way to explain it. It's still way more volatile than it was, and that explains a lot. And I think finishing stuff up or getting some kind of agreement where we get the Straits of Hormuz open, we see this go back down, and I could easily see this kind of moderate back to where it was, just puttering along at that point. Thoughts, Ron?
Uh, Let's go here and let's go back to the S&P.
Yeah.
So I told you, we've talked about this. I don't recommend anything that's pegged to oil. And I always show the chart over the last 3 or 4 years that oil is traded in a very tight range. I said, unless there's some geopolitical or exogenous shock, here we go. So here's the problem and the conundrum, which is it's going to go back down to 60, 65 at some point.
Yeah.
Problem is, we all know, and I've said this multiple times, nothing in the Middle East gets settled quickly. So
Nope.
let's just say, and I don't think it's going to happen, something happens peacefully soon, within a month. It'll come down maybe into the high, again, mid 80s. I still think because we've already basically turned up the heat, right? And even if we turn the heat down a little bit, I still think everybody's on edge because nobody trusts each other. It's going to hover in the 80s and 90s for a while. I think it's going to be a while before, maybe even a year before it comes back down into the 60s again, which is where it should be. Let's go back to the S&P 500. So
Here.
okay, so I've used the Bollinger Bands before. So at the minimum, it's going to come back to the medium part, the medium line.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
what's going to happen. And usually the way I've used Bollinger Bands is that when it breaches the top and the bottom band, that's when you look for reversals. So that's what happened at the end of March, right? It closed below the Bollinger Band. Usually I always look for 3 days of closure. I think you only had 2 there in a row.
Yep.
And then when it got to the top side, it actually did have 3 days, or actually more than 3 days. It ran a little bit before it went sideways and then went back up again. Typically, there's always a reversion to the mean one way or the other. This is a good way to look at it. And I've always talked to people, and I've been doing our client reviews and saying the same thing. On average, there are 5% pullbacks a year. Last year we had 2. We've already had 1 this year. I think we may get a flush out June or early July, and 1 more in October, because we always get 1 in September, October timeframe, and we go from there. Whether or not we finish the year positive, we'll see. But certainly with these earnings, NVIDIA coming out last night, beating the top and bottom line, NVIDIA's down a little bit for the day, but I think the price action got ahead of its earnings anyway. So it's going to go up there. The crazy thing is NVIDIA is right now sitting at 219. Price targets have already been breaching 300. I saw 303.25. I think that puts them at an $8 trillion company, or $7 trillion.
Yeah, they're such a beast. And there's so much. What it tells me is it's not just an NVIDIA story. Like I said, my themes, when we talked about this at the beginning of the year, my themes were around the data centers and really the picks and shovels of the data centers. And I still see so much opportunity in those areas. And it's funny because I hear from clients and they're talking about, I'm concerned because we're up so much and all this. And I'm like, yeah, but what you got to understand is I'm not necessarily investing in the market. I'm investing in very specific areas of the market that you just don't. Data centers are not hey, we're just going to throw them up now and go. It's going to be a trend for quite a while, and you got to have all those picks and shovels. So I think you've got to I think this is much more of a stock pickers market, and it's a trend followers market more than anything at this point, because the S&P has been kind of meh for the year.
Look, the story is not over with AI, but it's gonna step into a few potholes. The problem is, and it's so brutal to watch CNBC, is this a bubble? Is this 99 all over again? You gotta be crapping me, man. It
These
is
are real
real.
companies with real actual money. Yeah, that make actual money. It's like they're say what you want about NVIDIA, but I'm like, it's a company. It's a ginormous company that is making money hand over fist. It was what earnings were up like what 180%. Revenues were up like 85% on a $3 or $4 trillion company. That is insane. But it's the reality. It's like there is so much going on. And I was listening to Jensen Long this morning on the news, and he's like, guys, we're in like inning number 2 in this. He goes, it was inning 1 was like, okay, we just need to make AI start working. He's like, now we're in inning 2, and there's a lot of innings ahead of us with the agentic. And I don't even understand half of the stuff because I'm like, it's accelerating so fast and increasing. I don't even understand all of it, but I do understand, at least from the standpoint, my standpoint, I understand that we got to have the data centers to make this stuff work. So I'm not investing in the gold miners, I'm investing in the guys that make the picks and shovels for that, because those are the people that are going to make money hand over fist in this.
I agree. It's just a matter of time. What's people's horizon line? And
Yeah.
everybody, look, we were doing the client reviews, going through performance reports. Hey, I tell it, I know I look like a hero and I tuck in my cape under my shirt, but I
Mm.
mean, and I warn everybody, hey, we're going to step into a pothole here.
Yeah.
Be prepared. Nothing
Yeah.
to panic. I said, if there's anything to worry about, it's geopolitically right now. It's not these companies and a slowdown of what they're doing, because 30% of NVIDIA's revenue, plus or minus, I heard this stat last year, is from 4 companies:
Yeah.
Google, Apple, Meta, and Amazon.
Yeah.
That's 30% of NVIDIA's revenue. I may have gone higher now. Who the hell knows?
Yeah. And I don't see it stopping. Yeah. Now it's starting to spill out into the other areas, but there's so much of a need from those 4 companies, they can't even keep up with production to go out and beyond that. There's so much room to expand beyond that, but they just can't produce enough
No,
because there's such a massive demand from the hyperscalers at this point.
I hear you. All right. Until next week, I'm sure it won't be a dull week.
Absolutely not. Never is seems a dull week anymore. So we'll see what goes on. And let me stop sharing here. Hang on. Stop sharing. I don't want to share more. But yeah, folks, make sure that you are signing up for the channels, subscribe, and we will see you guys back here the very next time.